Hello and welcome. The scrolls speak of legends who never falter, whose every action weaves victory into the fabric of history. Yet you know better. You have walked long enough through the annals of Faerun to understand that even the mightiest can stumble, that even the wisest can be rendered powerless not through weakness, but through circumstance, and that sometimes the greatest tragedies unfold when heroes find themselves trapped, unable to answer the calls that matter most. Tonight, you will descend into the shadows of failure that even Elminster Armor, the sage of Shadowdale, cannot escape. You will witness the moments when his legendary power proved insufficient, when fate itself conspired against him, and when the weight of his absence allowed entire civilizations to crumble into ash and memory. The name Elminster carries weight across every corner of Faerun. For more than 12 centuries, he has stood as Mistress Chosen, as the guardian of magic itself, as the shepherd who guides nations through darkness. Bards sing of his triumphs. Scholars study his writings. Common folk whisper his name with reverence, believing that where Elminster walks, hope follows. Yet you have come here seeking something deeper than hero worship. You seek the cracks in the monument, the places where even this titan of arcane might stumbled and fell. You seek to understand that perfection exists nowhere, not even in the heart of the chosen. The city of Myth Drannor rises before you in memory, golden and radiant under an ancient sun. You walk its streets in a time long past, in an age when elves opened their gates to all races, when humans and dwarves and halflings studied side by side in the greatest libraries ever constructed. The year approaches 711 Dale reckoning, and Myth Drannor stands as the jewel of the world, the city of song, the crown of Cormenther. Magic flows through every stone, every garden, every tower that reaches toward the sky. The mythal that protects the city hums with power beyond mortal comprehension. A weaving of spells so intricate that it took centuries to complete and remains unmatched to this very day. The coronal Eltargrim has ruled this magnificent city for more than 800 years. His life extended by the mythal's power. His wisdom deepened by centuries of shepherding his people through peace and prosperity. The gates stand open to all who come in friendship, drawing tribes and peoples from lands far and wide, creating a union of cultures that has never been matched in all the ages before or since. You see humans learning alongside elves, dwarves sharing forge secrets with surface folk who once viewed them with suspicion, halflings finding homes in a city that celebrates diversity rather than fearing it. This is the dream made real, the proof that cooperation can transcend ancient hatreds. But you sense something gathering on the horizon, a darkness that watches the golden city with envious, hateful eyes. The army of darkness takes shape beyond the forest borders. a coalition of demons and devils summoned by Drow, who view Myth Drannor's openness as betrayal. Of Yugoloths and fiends, who exist only to corrupt and destroy. They gather in numbers that defy counting, marshalling forces that have slumbered in extra-dimensional prisons for millennia, waiting for the moment when ancient wards would finally fail. That moment arrives when Garnet, a good red dragon, flies above the city, unknowingly triggering the release of 3 Nikoloths, whose prison was specifically designed to open under such impossible circumstances. The Nikoloths emerge to lead the army of darkness, and the Weeping War begins. The year 711 Dale Reckoning marks the start of the siege, and you watch as the black tide crashes against Myth Drannor's walls. The Siege of Shadow unfolds with terrible fury, demons shrieking as they hurl themselves at the Mythal's barriers, devils advancing in disciplined ranks, corrupted elves leading contingents of orcs and gnolls, and worse things that have no names in common tongues. The defenders fight with courage that transcends mortal understanding. The cavalry and army of Myth Drannor meeting the enemy in battles that drench the earth with blood on both sides. The Mythal holds, but even that magnificent creation strains under the relentless assault, hairline fractures beginning to appear in its structure as spells hammer against it day after day, month after month. You search the battlements for Elminster, expecting to see him hurling lightning and fire, speaking words of power that unmake demons and banish devils back to their infernal homes. But he is not there. He does not stand on the walls. He does not walk among the defenders. His absence creates a wound in the city's defenses, a gap that cannot be filled by any other, no matter how powerful or skilled. Where is the Sage of Shadowdale when Myth Drannor needs him most? Where is Mistress Chosen when magic itself comes under siege? The answer lies not in choice or cowardice, but in a cruel twist of fate that renders him as powerless as if he were dead. Elminster had walked the streets of Myth Drannor for many decades before the catastrophe, living among the elves during the city's golden age, learning their magic, studying their lore, becoming part of the great experiment in cooperation and shared knowledge. He absorbed the teachings of the High Mages, those masters of arcane art whose power rivaled that of gods. He studied the Mythal itself, that incomprehensible weaving of protective magic that would become his lifelong obsession and model for what magic could achieve when wielded with patience and precision. He formed friendships with elven scholars who measured their lives in centuries rather than decades, who viewed time as a river to be savored rather than a resource to be hoarded. Myth Drannor shaped him in ways that would influence his entire existence, teaching him lessons about cooperation, about the value of preserving knowledge, about the importance of building institutions that could outlast any individual. no matter how powerful. But in the year of the cold clashes, 331 Dale Reckoning, nearly 4 centuries before Myth Drannor would face its greatest trial, Mystra herself called him away. The goddess had other purposes for her chosen, missions that required him to leave the city of song behind, tasks that could not wait and could not be delegated to others. The summons came with divine authority that could not be questioned or refused. Elminster departed from Myth Drannor's golden gates, looking back at the towers and gardens and libraries, trusting that the city would endure in his absence. He had every reason for such confidence. The Mythal stood strong. The high mages commanded power sufficient to unmake armies. The defenders numbered in the thousands, all trained and equipped and ready to face any threat. Myth Drannor had weathered dangers before and would surely weather them again. His departure felt temporary, a brief absence in service to the goddess, after which he would return to continue his studies and his life among the elves. That return never came. Mystra's missions led him to distant lands, to conflicts and crises that demanded his attention, to threats against magic itself that required the intervention of her chosen. The years passed, then decades, then centuries. 350 Dale Reckoning arrived, then 400, then 500. Elminster moved through Faerun like a storm, appearing where he was needed, solving problems that no one else could solve, defending the weave against enemies, both obvious and hidden. He heard news of Myth Drannor from travelers and merchants, received reports that the city of song continued to flourish, that the dream of cooperation between the races persisted and even strengthened with each passing generation. He had no reason to worry, no indication that catastrophe approached the city he had once called home. The centuries continued their relentless march. 600 Dale Reckoning came and went. 650 Dale Reckoning passed into history. Somewhere in the middle of that 7th century, Elminster entered a tomb on one of his endless quests. Perhaps he sought knowledge buried in ancient vaults. Perhaps he pursued a magical artifact that Mystra needed him to secure or destroy. Perhaps he followed a lead about a threat that required investigation. The specific details remain lost to history, buried beneath layers of time and silence, known perhaps only to Elminster himself and the gods who watch over such things. What matters is not why he entered that tomb, but what happened when he did. The tomb's ancient magic triggered, springing a trap laid by long-dead Netherese wizards, a people whose civilization had fallen thousands of years before, but whose magic still functioned with terrible efficiency. Stasis engulfed Elminster in an instant, freezing him between one heartbeat and the next, suspending him in a moment that would stretch on for decades. He did not sleep, He did not dream. He did not age or hunger or thirst or feel the passage of time in any meaningful way. He simply existed, trapped in stone and spell, his consciousness locked away, his body preserved perfectly but rendered completely inert. The world continued to turn outside his prison, but for Elminster, time stopped. The year 711 Dale Reckoning arrived in the world beyond the tomb, and with it came the beginning of Myth Drannor's end. The army of darkness had been gathering for years, drawing together forces from across multiple planes of existence, uniting demons who hated devils and devils who despised demons under a single banner of destruction. The trigger came in an instant, a moment of tragic irony. Garnet, a good red dragon who had befriended the people of Myth Drannor and often flew above the city in peaceful patrol, unknowingly activated an ancient prison that released 3 Nikoloths. These fiends had been trapped in an extra-dimensional space designed by the original creators of the region's defenses. A fail-safe that was supposed to provide aid in the city's darkest hour, but instead became the instrument of its doom. The prison was keyed to release only when a good red dragon flew overhead, a condition so specific that it should have been impossible. Yet fate has a cruel sense of humor, and the impossible became reality in 711 Dale Reckoning. The 3 Nikoloths emerged and immediately took command of the army of darkness, organizing the chaotic mass of fiends into a coherent fighting force. The siege began within days, the enemy crashing against Myth Drannor's walls like a tide of shadow and flame. The defenders met them with courage and skill. The cavalry and infantry of Myth Drannor engaging in battles that would be remembered in song for centuries to come. The high mages unleashed spells of devastating power, unmaking demons by the dozen, banishing devils back to the 9 hells, creating barriers of pure force that held back the tide for hours at a time. The mythal itself actively fought against the invaders, its defenses turning enemy magic back upon the casters, its wards making it impossible for fiends to simply teleport into the heart of the city. But the army of darkness numbered in the tens of thousands, perhaps even hundreds of thousands, a force so vast that even the mighty defenses of Myth Drannor struggled to contain it. For every demon destroyed, 2 more took its place. For every devil banished, 3 more advanced to fill the gap. The siege ground on, day after terrible day, week after exhausting week. The defenders fought without rest, rotating shifts, pulling every able body into the defense, transforming the city of song into a fortress under constant assault. The year 712 Dale Reckoning arrived, and still the siege continued, the army of darkness showing no sign of exhaustion or retreat. Elminster remained trapped in his tomb throughout all of this, frozen in stasis, while the city he had once called home fought for its survival. He could not know that Myth Drannor burned. He could not hear the calls for aid that went unanswered. He could not sense the Mythal's growing strain as the most powerful defensive construction in the history of Faerûn slowly cracked under relentless assault. He simply existed in his frozen moment, a prisoner of ancient magic, as powerless to help as if he had never been born. The year 713 Dale reckoning dawned, and the defenders of Myth Drannor grew desperate. The casualties mounted into the thousands, then tens of thousands. Warriors died on the walls. Mages collapsed from exhaustion and never rose again. Common folk who had taken up arms to defend their home fell beneath claws and blades and unholy magic. The Mythal's structure showed visible cracks now, fractures in the protective weave that the high mages struggled to repair even as new damage appeared. Messengers went out to neighboring realms, calling for aid, begging for reinforcements, pleading for any help that could be spared. Some assistance arrived, heroes and soldiers from distant lands coming to defend the greatest city in the world. But it was not enough. It would never be enough against an army that seemed endless. The year of doom, 714 Dale reckoning, brought the final catastrophe. The Mythal shattered on a day when the sky itself seemed to weep, its protective barriers failing all at once in a cascade of broken magic. The sound echoed across Faerûn, a crystalline scream that every mage alive felt in their bones, a death rattle that marked the end of an age. The army of darkness poured through the breached walls like water through a broken dam, overwhelming the last defenders despite their heroic resistance. The streets of Myth Drannor, which had once rung with songs of joy and learning, now filled with screams and the clash of desperate battle. The Coronel Eltargrim, who had ruled Myth Drannor for more than 8 centuries, died defending his people to his final breath, his sword in his hand, his crown still upon his head. The high mages who had maintained the Mythal for generations died trying to shore up its fracturing structure, pouring their own life force into one last desperate attempt to hold the barriers for just one more hour, one more minute, one more second. The scholars died clutching scrolls and books, trying to save fragments of knowledge from the flames that consumed the greatest libraries in the world. The common defenders died knowing their sacrifice meant something, that they had given their enemies a battle worthy of song, even if few would survive to sing those songs. The city fell completely, utterly, irrevocably. The streets that had welcomed all races in friendship now ran red with blood. The towers that had reached toward the sky like prayers, made manifest, toppled and burned. The gardens where humans and elves and dwarves had walked together, sharing knowledge and building friendships that transcended ancient prejudices, became charnel grounds choked with the dead. The libraries, those repositories of wisdom gathered from across Faerun and beyond, burned for weeks, destroying knowledge that existed nowhere else, reducing centuries of scholarship to ash and memory. The army of darkness claimed the ruins, corrupting the very stones with their presence, ensuring that even centuries later Myth Drannor would remain a haunted wasteland inhabited by fiends and worse things. Most survivors fled to the Elven Court or distant Evermeet, carrying with them the grief of watching the greatest city in the world die, while they could do nothing to prevent its destruction. Some remained in the region, forming small settlements in the forest, preserving what fragments they could of the culture and knowledge that had been lost. But Myth Drannor itself was gone, the city of song reduced to a monument of failure, a reminder that even the mightiest civilizations can fall when darkness gathers sufficient strength. Elminster remained trapped in his tomb prison, unaware that Myth Drannor had fallen, that thousands had died, that the dream of cooperation between the races had been shattered by demonic claws and infernal fire. The years continued to crawl past outside his frozen prison. 720 Dale Reckoning arrived, and in that year the Harpers were refounded, establishing the organization that would become central to Elminster's life's work when he finally emerged. 730 Dale Reckoning passed. 740 came and went. The world transformed around him. Nations rose and fell. New threats emerged. Magic continued its eternal dance between order and chaos. And still Elminster remained trapped, a prisoner of circumstance and ancient Nethery's enchantment. The year 759 Dale Reckoning finally arrived, and something shifted in the tomb's enchantments. Perhaps the spell simply expired after running its course for approximately a century, the magic finally exhausting the power source that had sustained it for so long. Perhaps some external force disrupted it, another adventurer triggering mechanisms that neutralized the stasis field. Perhaps Mystra herself finally located her missing chosen and broke the binding that held him. Though if this were the case, one must wonder why it took the goddess so long to find him. Whatever the cause, Elminster emerged from the dusty tomb after roughly 100 years of involuntary imprisonment, stumbling into sunlight that felt alien after his long absence. His body had not aged, frozen by the same magic that held him captive. His mind remained sharp, unfogged by the passage of time, his memories intact up to the moment of his entrapment. But the world he stepped into bore little resemblance to the one he had left behind. The first clue came from the unfamiliar constellations in the night sky, stars having shifted in their eternal rotation during his century of absence. The second clue came from the state of his equipment, once pristine, but now covered in a century's worth of dust. The third clue came when he finally encountered other people and began asking questions about current events. The realization came slowly, then all at once, like dawn breaking after the longest night. A century had passed. 100 years had been stolen from him. 100 years during which he stood frozen and helpless while the world continued without him. He began gathering information carefully, piecing together the history he had missed, learning about the events that had shaped Faerun during his absence. The news came in fragments, in careful words from those who remembered, in historical records that documented the catastrophes of the past century. And among those catastrophes, one stood out with terrible clarity. Myth Drannor had fallen. The city of Song lay in ruins, its streets haunted by demons, its libraries reduced to ash, its people scattered or dead. 45 years had passed since the final catastrophe, long enough for new growth to cover the burned earth, long enough for survivors to build new lives elsewhere, long enough for the wound to scar over even if it never truly healed. Elminster learned these facts in fragments, each new piece of information landing like a physical blow. The Coronel Eltargrim was dead. The High Mages were dead. The libraries were gone. The dream that he had witnessed in its glory had been shattered during the very years when he stood frozen, unable to help, unable even to know that help was needed. The guilt settled over him like a burial shroud, heavy and suffocating. You feel it in the slump of his shoulders as he hears the tale, in the way his hands tremble when someone mentions Coronel Eltargrim's final stand, in the haunted look that enters his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. He understands the cruel mathematics of his absence. Could he have saved Myth Drannor if he had been there? The question has no certain answer, but the possibilities torment him. His power combined with the mythal, and the High Mages might have turned back the army of darkness, might have broken the siege before it ground on for 3 terrible years, might have prevented the mythal from shattering under the relentless assault. This suggests that his presence could have made a difference, that one more Archmage of his caliber might have tipped the balance in favor of the defenders. The High Mages were powerful, certainly, but they were stretched thin, forced to maintain the mythal while simultaneously fighting off the army of darkness. Elminster's arrival would have given them breathing room, allowed them to focus on shoring up the mythal's weaknesses while he dealt with threats on the ground. His knowledge of offensive magic, honed through centuries of combat against threats across Faerun, combined with the defensive genius of the High Mages, might have created a synergy powerful enough to break the siege. But these are only possibilities, speculations built on questions that can never be answered with certainty. The pragmatic part of his mind offers cold comfort. He did not choose to be trapped. He did not abandon Myth Drannor willingly. No amount of power or wisdom could have saved the city from beyond the walls of stasis that held him prisoner. He was a victim of circumstance, of bad luck, of fate's cruel humor. Blaming himself for failing to be present makes as much sense as blaming a dead man for not rising from his grave to fight. The logic is sound, unassailable, completely rational. But you hear the other voice in his thoughts, the voice he silences, but cannot eliminate entirely. Logic provides no comfort when thousands died, while you stood frozen, unable to help. Circumstance offers no absolution when the greatest city in the world fell, while you were trapped in a tomb. Fate's cruelty does not erase the simple fact that you were not there, and your absence left a gap that contributed to catastrophe. You failed them not through choice, but through unavailability. And perhaps that makes it worse rather than better. At least a choice implies agency, implies some measure of control. Being trapped strips away even that small dignity, leaving only helpless witness to consequences you were powerless to prevent. Elminster joins the Harpers shortly after emerging from stasis, throwing himself into the work of that organization with intensity that borders on obsession. The Harpers had been refounded in 720 Dale Reckoning during his imprisonment, and by 759 Dale Reckoning, they had established themselves as a force for good across Faerun, working in shadows to oppose tyranny and preserve knowledge. The organization's goals aligned perfectly with lessons Elminster had learned in Myth Drannor. The belief that cooperation between diverse peoples created strength, that knowledge was precious and must be preserved, that tyranny must be opposed wherever it emerged. He serves Mistra with renewed dedication, as if making up for lost time, as if frantic activity can somehow balance the scales of 100 years stolen from him. He becomes more careful about accepting missions that might trap him, more cautious about entering ancient tombs or places where magic might turn against him. The memory of helpless stasis haunts him, shapes him, reminds him that power means nothing if circumstances render you unable to use it. Before entering dangerous locations, he establishes contingencies, leaves word with allies about where he has gone and when they should expect his return, sets up magical alarms that will trigger if he fails to check in at regular intervals. These precautions cannot guarantee his safety, but they reduce the chances that he will simply vanish for another century while the world burns without his aid. The Fall of Myth Drannor becomes the first great scar on Elminster's soul, a reminder that even the chosen can be rendered irrelevant by cruel fate. Bards sing of the city's glory and its tragic end, but they rarely mention the absence of the Sage of Shadowdale, trapped in stasis while the Weeping War raged. Historians debate what might have changed if more powerful defenders had been present during the siege. But few think to include Elminster in that reckoning, assuming he had good reasons for being elsewhere, or simply not realizing he was trapped and unavailable. The common folk remember Myth Drannor as a cautionary tale about the dangers of openness and the inevitable fall of golden ages, never knowing that one man's involuntary absence might have played a role in the tragedy. But Elminster himself never forgets. You walk with him through the centuries that follow, and you see how Myth Drannor haunts him. Every time he passes near the ruins, he feels the weight of what was lost. Every time someone speaks of the coronal Eltargrim, or the high mages, or the libraries that burned, he remembers that he was not there when they needed him most. Every time he enters a tomb or ancient place of power, part of him fears the moment when magic might trap him again, might steal another century while the world burns without his aid. The wound never fully closes, even as other failures pile upon it, even as the weight of centuries buries it beneath layers of newer regrets. This is the first lesson in the saga of Elminster's failures. Power and wisdom, no matter how great, cannot overcome the simple cruelty of circumstance. One person, even one immortal and impossibly powerful person, can be rendered utterly irrelevant by being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Being trapped in stasis for a century, while a great city falls, is not a failure of character or judgment or ability. It is simply a failure of presence, of availability, of being able to act when action matters most. The sage of Shadowdale learned this truth in the aftermath of Myth Drannor's destruction. But the lesson offers no comfort and no solution. It simply is an inescapable fact of a life stretched across centuries, an unavoidable reminder that even the chosen can be rendered powerless by fate's cruel hand. The ruins of Myth Drannor stand to this day, a monument to glory lost and heroes who fought impossible battles without the aid they desperately needed. Demons still walk those haunted streets. The Mythal's shattered remnants still echo with power and grief. And somewhere in those ruins lies the memory of what might have been if Elminster Amur had not spent the Weeping War trapped in stone and spell, frozen in helpless stasis, while the city of song sang its final, mournful note. Section 2. The time of troubles and Elminster's powerlessness. The centuries roll forward, carrying Elminster through ages of triumph and struggle, through the rise and fall of kingdoms, through wars and peace, and everything between. He grows in power and wisdom, becoming one of the most formidable mages in all of Faerun. His name spoken with reverence from Waterdeep to Thay. Mystra grants him greater access to the weave, deepening his connection to magic itself, making him one of her most trusted chosen. He walks as a near demigod among mortals, capable of feats that defy comprehension, able to reshape reality with words and gestures. Power flows through him like a river, endless and unstoppable. Or so it seems. The year 1358 Dale Reckoning arrives, the year of shadows, and with it comes a catastrophe that strips away every illusion of invincibility Elminster has ever harbored. The gods themselves are cast down from their divine realms, forced to walk Toril in mortal avatars, their powers diminished, but their presence undeniable. Lord Io, the overgod who stands above all other deities, has grown displeased with the gods' neglect of their duties, their indifference to the mortals who worship them, their increasing distance from the world they are supposed to shepherd. His judgment is swift and merciless. The gods will walk among mortals until they learn humility, until they remember what it means to be vulnerable, until they reconnect with the world they have taken for granted. The tablets of fate disappear, stolen by the gods Bane and Miakul. These tablets contain the cosmic laws that define each deity's portfolio, their responsibilities, their very identities. Without them, the heavens fall into chaos. Io seals the divine realms, preventing the gods from returning until the tablets are recovered and order is restored. Divine magic becomes unreliable, functioning only when clerics stand within 1 mile of their deity's avatar. The fabric of reality itself strains under the weight of so many divine beings, compressed into forms never meant to contain such power. You watch Elminster receive the first signs that something has gone catastrophically wrong. He reaches for the weave as he has done countless times before, expecting the familiar rush of power, the sensation of magic flowing through him like blood through veins. Instead, he finds chaos. The connection that has defined him for more than a millennium, the bond with Mistra that makes him chosen, fluctuates wildly. One moment it exists, thrumming with life and possibility. The next moment it wavers, becomes unreliable, transforms into something dangerous and unpredictable. Magic itself has become destabilized, no longer regulated by its steward Mistra, who now walks the earth in mortal form. Panic rises in his chest, cold and terrible. He tries again, reaching deeper, searching for any trace of Mistra's reliable presence. The connection exists, but twisted, corrupted by the catastrophic disruption of having the goddess of magic herself reduced to mortal flesh. He speaks words of power that should reshape reality, and they produce wildly unpredictable effects, sometimes failing completely, sometimes erupting with consequences unrelated to his intentions. He attempts to teleport, one of the most basic applications of high magic, and finds the spell either fizzling out completely or transporting him to unintended locations. the truth crashes over him with devastating force. Mystra has been cast down, forced into mortal form like all the other deities. And without her divine power maintaining the cosmic balance that allows magic to function reliably, Elminster is reduced to a fraction of his former might. He remains more capable than common mages, but the overwhelming superiority he once commanded has been stripped away by forces completely beyond his control. The time of troubles unfolds across Faerun with apocalyptic fury. Gods walk the streets of major cities, some trying to help their mortal followers, others lashing out in rage at their diminished state. Torm manifests in tantras, fighting to protect the city from threats, both mortal and divine. Bane seizes control of his avatar in Gentle Keep, using his dark powers to terrorize the region despite his reduced state. Miakul gathers forces, pursuing his own schemes with the desperation of a god forced into vulnerability. Lathander, god of dawn and renewal, wanders the countryside, his presence causing flowers to bloom and crops to flourish, even as chaos reigns elsewhere. The very ground trembles under their footsteps, reality bending around divine beings, never meant to walk among mortals in such concentrated numbers. Elminster finds himself in an impossible position. The world needs him more than ever, faces threats that demand the intervention of the most powerful defenders available. Yet he has been reduced to a fraction of his former might. The spells he once cast without thought now require exhausting concentration, and even then, they often fail or produce unpredictable results. The magic items he carries, crafted over centuries and imbued with tremendous power, function erratically, their enchantments disrupted by the fluctuating nature of the weave itself. He is like a master swordsman whose blade has been replaced with brittle glass, a general whose army has deserted on the eve of battle, a sailor whose ship has sunk beneath him while still miles from shore. You follow him through the chaos of those terrible months. He travels to Shadowdale, his home base, and finds it threatened by forces that would normally pose no challenge to him, but now represent genuine danger. He marshals the defenders, drawing on his centuries of tactical experience, his deep knowledge of magic theory, his ability to inspire and lead even when his own power fails. He instructs other mages in techniques that might stabilize their spells despite the turbulent weave, sharing knowledge accumulated over more than a millennium. He uses mundane methods, politics and diplomacy, and careful planning to achieve what he once accomplished with a gesture and a word. While he struggles in his diminished state, other chosen, the Knights of Myth Drannor, and the Rangers 3 help hold off the forces of evil, defending what can be defended while reality itself convulses. But it is not enough. It can never be enough. The scale of the crisis dwarfs anything that can be solved through mortal means alone. Gods die during the time of troubles, their avatars destroyed in battles that reshape the landscape. On the 13th day of Alesia's, the 8th month, Bane falls in Tantras, struck down by Torm in a confrontation that levels entire city blocks and can be seen from miles away. Torm himself is annihilated by Bane's dying breath. The demigod patron of paladins destroyed in the same moment, he achieves victory. Baal, god of murder, is slain by the mortal hero Cyric in the city of Boresker Bridge, his blood soaking into the earth and spawning unholy powers. And Mystra herself, the goddess who gave Elminster his purpose, who shaped him into one of the greatest mages in history, who spoke to him across the centuries in moments of triumph and despair, dies during the time of troubles. The death comes when she attempts to defy Io's command, desperately trying to return to her divine realm by climbing the celestial stairway. Helm, the god of guardians, the only deity allowed to retain his full divinity during the time of troubles, stands as watcher over the passage between the mortal world and the divine realms. When Mystra tries to force her way past him, Helm has no choice but to fulfill his duty. He strikes her down, killing the goddess of magic, fulfilling Io's command, even though doing so brings catastrophic consequences for all of Faerun. The consequences ripple across Faerun instantly. Magic becomes even more unstable than it was before, wild surges erupting randomly, spells producing effects completely unrelated to their intended purpose. Some areas become dead magic zones where no spell functions at all. Other regions transform into wild magic zones where reality itself becomes fluid and unpredictable. The weave, already strained by Mystra's reduction to mortal form, now suffers catastrophic damage from the complete absence of its goddess. Elminster feels Mystra's death like a physical blow, like part of his own soul being torn away. The connection that defined him for more than 1,000 years is not just severed, but obliterated, leaving a wound that will never fully heal. He staggers under the weight of loss, grief crashing over him in waves that threaten to drown him completely. She was more than his goddess. She was his guide, his teacher, his reason for existing across centuries that would have broken lesser beings. And now she is gone, destroyed when she tried to return to the heavens against Io's command, struck down by Helm while Elminster stood helpless, unable to intervene, unable to save her, reduced to the role of spectator at the most critical moment in the history of magic itself. The pragmatic part of his mind understands the impossibility of the situation. What could he have done? Even at full power, he was still mortal, still bound by limitations that gods transcend. Facing Helm in defense of Mystra's defiance would have been suicide, would have accomplished nothing except adding his death to hers. fighting in divine conflicts, battles between beings who reshape reality with their thoughts, represents challenges beyond even the chosen. Mystra herself would have ordered him to stand aside, to preserve himself, to survive so that he could help rebuild whatever emerged from the ashes of the time of troubles. Logic dictates that his powerlessness spared him from death. That weakness in this case became a form of protection. But logic offers no comfort when grief tears at your heart. You hear the voice in his thoughts that whispers accusations in the dark hours before dawn. You were her chosen, and you could not save her. You have stood against archdevils and demon lords, faced down ancient dragons and lich kings, toppled tyrants, and stopped apocalyptic rituals. Yet, when your goddess needed you most, you stood aside because you lacked the power to intervene. Perhaps if you had been stronger, faster, wiser, more prepared, you could have found a way. Perhaps if you had searched harder for Mystra's avatar, located her before she attempted to climb the celestial stairway, you could have stopped her from making the fatal choice that led to Helm's intervention. Perhaps if you had solved the mystery of the tablets of fate more quickly, brought them back to Io before the situation spiraled beyond control, none of this would have happened. But Midnight, a relatively young mage who has carried one of the tablets of fate throughout her journeys, succeeds where Elminster cannot. You watch this mortal woman, blessed by fate and Mystra's foresight, play a crucial role in resolving the crisis. On the 15th day of Marpanoth, the 10th month of 1358 Dale Reckoning, Midnight confronts Miakul, the god of death, in the skies above Waterdeep. She wields powers granted to her by the dying Mystra, who foresaw her own death and transferred much of her divine essence into this young mage as a contingency. The battle between Midnight and Miakul reshapes the sky above Waterdeep, divine and near-divine powers, clashing in a duel that determines the fate of death itself across Faerun. Midnight emerges victorious, destroying Miakul and scattering his essence to the winds. The time of troubles lasts from the first day of Elysia's to the 15th day of Marpanoth in 1358 Dale Reckoning. Approximately 4 months and 16 days in total, though the chaos it generates echoes for years afterward. When the crisis finally resolves, the world emerges forever changed. Cyric ascends to godhood, claiming the portfolios of the fallen Bane, Baal, and Miakul, becoming one of the most powerful and dangerous deities in the pantheon. Midnight also ascends, granted divinity by Io himself at Mount Waterdeep, and she takes up the name and role of Mystra, becoming the new goddess of magic. The weave stabilizes under her governance, magic returning to reliable function, though subtle differences remain that mages will debate for decades to come. Elminster's powers return with the restoration of the weave and the ascension of the new Mystra. The connection flows back into him like water filling a dry riverbed, magic surging through his veins once more, the familiar weight of divine favor settling onto his shoulders. The new Mistra recognizes him as chosen, accepting the bond that existed between him and her predecessor, granting him access to power that places him once again among the most formidable beings in Faerun. He should feel relieved. He should celebrate the return of what was lost. He should embrace this new beginning with gratitude and joy. Instead, he feels hollow. The power returned, but something else was lost that can never be recovered. The Mistra he knew, the goddess who chose him in the first place, who guided him through centuries of service, who spoke to him in dreams and visions, is gone forever. This new Mistra is not her, cannot be her, no matter how seamlessly she assumes the role. She has Midnight's memories, Midnight's personality, Midnight's perspective shaped by a mere 30 years of mortal life, rather than millennia of divine existence. She is competent, dedicated, genuinely committed to her role as goddess of magic. But she is not the Mistra that Elminster loved, served, and ultimately failed to save. The relationship between Elminster and the new Mistra grows complex over the years that follow. She trusts him, relies on him, values his experience and wisdom. He serves her faithfully, protecting the weave, defending magic against threats both mortal and divine. To outside observers, nothing has changed. The sage of Shadowdale remains Mistress chosen, continues his work, maintains his position as one of the premier defenders of Faerun. But you see the distance that never quite closes, the careful formality that colors their interactions, the way Elminster sometimes looks at her and sees someone else, someone who is gone and will never return. The time of troubles teaches Elminster a lesson more painful than Myth Drannor's fall. At least in that first great failure, he could blame circumstance, could point to the stasis that trapped him beyond his will or ability to escape. But during the time of troubles, he was present, aware, desperate to help, and simply unable to do so because his power depended entirely on a goddess who was herself rendered vulnerable. He learned that being chosen means being dependent, that his greatest strength flows from a source outside himself, that when that source fails or falls, he becomes nearly irrelevant regardless of his accumulated knowledge or skill. The political implications shake him as well. Throughout the time of troubles, he watches other beings rise to meet the challenge in ways he cannot. Midnight, a relatively young mage with perhaps 3 decades of experience, plays a crucial role in resolving the crisis, ultimately ascending to godhood itself. Kelimver, a fighter with no magical ability whatsoever, demonstrates courage and capability that dwarf what Elminster can contribute in his diminished state. Common soldiers and ordinary priests accomplish more during those chaotic months than the legendary Sage of Shadowdale, simply because their abilities do not depend on a destabilized weave or a vulnerable goddess. You watch him grapple with these realizations in the months and years after the time of troubles ends. He throws himself into research, studying the nature of magic more deeply than ever before, seeking ways to maintain power even if the weave itself should fail again. He experiments with alternate sources of magical energy, explores techniques that draw from personal will rather than external divine power, investigates methods used by sorcerers who channel magic through their bloodline rather than learned ritual. Some of these experiments bear fruit, granting him backup options that might function if the weave ever becomes unreliable again. But none of them match the sheer power available through his connection to Mistra, and he knows it. The nightmares come frequently in the years immediately following the time of troubles. He dreams of reaching for power that is not there, of facing threats he cannot overcome, of watching cities burn while he stands paralyzed by his own inadequacy. He dreams of Mistra dying over and over, each version slightly different, but always ending the same way, with her struck down by Helm as she tried to climb the celestial stairway, her essence scattered and lost, while he watches helplessly from a distance. He dreams of the moment when magic failed him, when spells that should have saved lives fizzled into nothing, when people died because the Sage of Shadowdale could not muster the power to defend them. The other chosen share his trauma, each processing the experience in their own way. The symbol, who will later become entangled in Elminster's personal life in ways both beautiful and tragic, emerges from the time of troubles with her own scars, her own memories of powerlessness and loss. Kelvin Aronson, the Blackstaff of Waterdeep, becomes even more paranoid and controlling, obsessed with establishing backup plans and contingencies for every possible future crisis. Laryl Silverhand throws herself into politics and city management, seeking to build systems that can function even when magic fails and gods fall. They all understand what most mortals cannot grasp. The illusion of security has been shattered. The belief that power guarantees protection proven false. The time of troubles also exposes the fundamental unfairness of Elminster's position. He is blamed when things go wrong, but rarely given credit for what goes right. During his powerless months, people whispered that the Sage of Shadowdale had failed them, wondering why he did not simply solve all problems with a wave of his hand, not understanding that the hand itself had been rendered nearly empty. Yet when crisis is averted through his intervention, when disasters are prevented through his careful work, few notice or care because the very nature of prevention means that nothing dramatic occurs. He is expected to be everywhere, solve everything, protect everyone, And when he inevitably falls short of that impossible standard, he is condemned for his inadequacy. The weight of expectation crushes him in ways that physical threats never could. People see Elminster armor and assume invincibility, assume omniscience, assume that more than a millennium of life has granted him answers to questions that may have no answers at all. They do not see the man beneath the legend, the being who still doubts, still fears, still grieves for losses that compound across centuries. They do not understand that power and wisdom, no matter how great, cannot overcome certain fundamental limitations. They simply expect miracles and grow resentful when miracles fail to materialize. You walk beside him through the decades that follow the time of troubles, watching how the experience shapes him. He becomes more cautious, more likely to establish contingency plans, more aware of his own vulnerability. He diversifies his capabilities, learning skills that do not depend on magic, cultivating networks of allies who can act when he cannot, preparing for the possibility that divine power might fail him again. He also becomes more empathetic to those who lack power, more understanding of what it means to face threats you cannot overcome, more patient with those who do their best despite knowing it will not be enough. But the core wound remains, never fully healing. Mystra died while he watched, helpless to intervene, reduced to irrelevance by circumstance and cosmic forces beyond his control. The goddess who gave his life meaning was destroyed when she tried to defy Io and climb the celestial stairway back to the heavens, struck down by Helm in fulfillment of the Overgod's command. A stranger wearing her name took her place, a mortal woman elevated to godhood who serves competently, but can never replace what was lost. He serves the new Mystra faithfully, honors his role as chosen, continues the work of protecting magic across Faerun. But something was lost during the time of troubles that can never be recovered. Something essential that once connected him to his purpose in ways the new arrangement never quite replicates. This is the second lesson in Elminster's saga of failure. Dependence creates vulnerability. His greatest power flows from Mystra, which means that when she falls, he falls with her, rendered nearly powerless regardless of his accumulated skill and knowledge. Being chosen means being chosen by someone, and that someone can be killed, can be removed, can be replaced by another who is not quite the same. The time of troubles stripped away the illusion that Elminster's power was his own, revealed it as borrowed divinity that could be revoked at any moment, and taught him that even the goddess of magic herself is not immune to death. Some lessons cannot be unlearned, some wounds cannot be healed, and some failures echo across centuries precisely because they reveal truths too painful to fully accept. Section 3. The Spellplague and the Lost Decades. The years between the time of troubles and the next great catastrophe pass in what seems like relative peace, at least by the standards of Faerun, where peace is always temporary and crisis forever lurks just beyond the horizon. Elminster rebuilds his relationship with the new Mistra, learns to work with a goddess who wears a familiar name but carries a different soul, adapts to subtle changes in the weave that only the most experienced mages can perceive. He continues his endless work protecting magic, defending the realm, standing against threats both obvious and hidden. The centuries roll forward as they always have, carrying him through ages that would break lesser beings. And he endures because endurance is what he does best. But you sense the gathering storm long before it breaks. The year 1385 Dale Reckoning approaches, the year of blue fire, carrying with it a catastrophe that will dwarf even the time of troubles in its lasting impact on magic itself. The gods Cyric and Shar, driven by madness and jealousy and hatred that transcends mortal comprehension, conspire to murder Mistra, not to cast her down as Io did during the time of troubles, not to diminish or imprison or temporarily remove her from power, but to kill her completely, to extinguish her divine essence, to erase the goddess of magic from existence. Their plot unfolds in shadows and whispers, hidden from those who might intervene, concealed behind layers of deception that even the other gods fail to penetrate until too late. Elminster senses something wrong in the days before the catastrophe strikes. The weave feels different, strained in ways that remind him uncomfortably of the time of troubles, humming with tension like a rope pulled too tight. He reaches out to Mistra through their connection, seeking reassurance, asking if she perceives the disturbance. Her responses come slower than usual, distracted, as if her attention focuses elsewhere on threats she cannot or will not name. He presses harder, demanding answers, insisting that something terrible approaches. But before she can respond fully, before he can piece together the nature of the danger, the world tears itself apart. On the 29th day of Tarsak, the 4th month of 1385 Dale Reckoning, Mistra dies. Cyric, aided by Shar, murders the goddess of magic in her own domain of Tuiomerheart. The assassination happens in divine realms beyond mortal perception, but its effects crash across Faerun like a tsunami of broken magic. The weave, that fundamental structure that allows magic to function in controlled and predictable ways, shatters. Not the temporary disruption of the time of troubles, not the wild fluctuations that resolved once a new goddess ascended, but complete and catastrophic collapse. Magic itself breaks, fractures, becomes something alien and dangerous that no longer follows rules or responds to training or respects the careful theories built up over millennia of study. You watch Elminster experience the moment of severance. One instant, he maintains his connection to Mistra, feeling her presence through the bond that defines him as chosen. The next instant, nothing. Worse than nothing. A wound where the connection used to be. A tearing sensation that drops him to his knees, as if struck by a physical blow. He gasps for air, his hands clutching at his chest, his mind reeling from the sudden amputation of something so fundamental that losing it feels like losing part of his own soul. The power that has flowed through him for more than a millennium, the divine favor that made him one of the most formidable beings in Faerun, simply vanishes. And this time, he knows with terrible certainty that it will not return in a month, or a year, or perhaps ever. The Spellplague erupts across the world with apocalyptic fury. Blue flames erupt from nowhere, consuming everything they touch, transforming matter and energy into twisted parodies of what they once were. Entire regions are reshaped, continents torn apart, lands swapped with alternate planes of existence in exchanges that defy comprehension. Thousands of mages die instantly, their bodies unable to contain the wild magic that suddenly flows through them unchecked. Based on what the evidence suggests, approximately 1/3 of all spellcasters perish in the initial catastrophe, likely those who relied most heavily on magical wards and defenses for their survival. Millions of common folk perish in the initial catastrophe, cities collapsing, nations dissolving, the very geography of Faerun rewriting itself in blood and chaos. Elminster nearly dies. The magical backlash tears him apart, ripping through his body and soul with forces that should have destroyed him completely. His power drains away like water through a broken dam, leaving him with barely a fraction of what he once commanded. For the first time in centuries, Elminster is truly mortal, truly vulnerable. He survives only through a combination of desperate magic, help from the few allies who can still reach him, and sheer, stubborn refusal to die. The spells that used to come as naturally as breathing now require exhausting concentration, and often fail despite his best efforts. The magic items he accumulated over centuries become unreliable or inert, their enchantments disrupted by the broken nature of magic itself. He is not rendered completely powerless, but what remains is so diminished compared to his former might that the difference feels academic. A candle still provides light, but it does not compare to the sun. The symbol suffers even worse. You turn your attention to Oglarond, to the woman who became Elminster's lover, his partner, his equal in power and wisdom and dedication to protecting Faerun. She stands as one of Mistra's chosen, Queen of Oglarond, one of the most powerful sorceresses in the world, her magic so vast that she once fought entire armies single-handedly and emerged victorious. But the Spellplague strikes her with particular cruelty, perhaps because her power runs deeper than most, perhaps because she channels magic through sorceress bloodlines that make her especially vulnerable to the weave's collapse. The magical backlash drives her mad, not the temporary confusion of someone who has taken a blow to the head, but deep, profound insanity that strips away reason and leaves only fragments of the person she once was. Elminster, barely surviving himself, manages to keep her alive through the worst of the Spellplague. You watch him pour what little power he has left into maintaining her life, keeping her body functioning even as her mind fractures into pieces that may never fully reconnect. The woman who once ruled a kingdom, who commanded magic that rivaled the gods themselves, becomes dependent on Elminster's care, unable to rule, unable even to recognize where or who she is most days. She went missing from Oglarond, and in her absence, her 4 apprentices, the sorcerer wizards Thornira Thalance, Feldara, Evenile Nathdalond, and the sorcerer rogue, known as the Masked One, stepped up to serve as rotating joint regents. They survived the Spellplague through a technique the symbol had secretly taught them, riding the weave by abandoning their bodies and plunging into the weave as sentiences to weather the wailing years. They returned around 1400 Dale Reckoning as weakened versions of themselves, when arcane magic could largely be trusted again. What follows for Elminster is a period of wandering and recovery that lasts for decades. The Spellplague transforms Faerun in ways that make the world almost unrecognizable. The magic he spent more than a millennium mastering no longer functions reliably. The weave he dedicated his existence to protecting lies in ruins. The goddess he served is dead, murdered by gods who conspired in shadow. And the woman he loves drifts in and out of madness, sometimes recognizing him, sometimes staring at him with eyes that hold no comprehension whatsoever. Elminster is forced to rely on cleverness and accumulated wisdom rather than overwhelming magical might. You follow him through the decades after the Spellplague, watching him adapt to a world where power no longer flows from divine favor, but must be scraped together from whatever fragments remain. He learns to work with broken magic, to cast spells through a weave that no longer exists in its original form, to achieve through patience and cunning what he once accomplished with a thought. This period, though devastating, enriches him in ways prosperity never could. He becomes more human, more vulnerable, more capable of understanding what it means to lack the power to solve every problem. But the losses mount, each one adding weight to burdens already almost too heavy to bear. The world he knew continues to transform beyond recognition. Empires fall, new powers rise. Magic becomes something alien and unpredictable. And through it all, Elminster endures, not because he wants to, not because he finds joy in survival, but because endurance is all he has left. The years crawl past with agonizing slowness. 1400 Dale reckoning arrives, then 1420, then 1450. Elminster struggles through each decade, watching the world rebuild itself in ways that feel wrong, that violate everything he once knew about how magic should function. The symbol remains lost in madness for much of this time, her moments of lucidity becoming rarer as the years pass. By 1425 Dale reckoning, she is presumed dead by most who once knew her, though Elminster keeps her alive through methods known only to him. The year 1479 Dale reckoning arrives, and Elminster finds himself entangled in conflicts that threaten what little stability Cormer has managed to maintain in the post-Spellplague world. Manchun, the ancient enemy who has plagued Elminster for centuries, resurfaces with schemes to conquer Cormer. This Manchun is a vampire, turned by the Night King Orlak and ruling secretly over Westgate before setting his sights on greater prizes. The conflict escalates throughout 1479 Dale reckoning, drawing Elminster into battles he can barely survive in his weakened state. Then comes a moment that defines the entire period of the Spellplague. The symbol, in one of her increasingly rare moments of clarity, makes a choice. She understands what Elminster has sacrificed to keep her alive, understands the toll that decades of caring for her broken mind have taken on him, understands that he cannot continue to fight while simultaneously sustaining her existence. She sacrifices herself to restore Elminster, pouring her remaining power and essence into him, giving him back a fraction of what the Spellplague stole. She does not die completely, but transforms into a weave ghost, a sentience that rides the fragments of the restored weave, able to perceive magic and whisper warnings, but no longer possessing a physical form. Empowered by the collected magical energies and enraged over the losses he has suffered, Elminster goes on a rampage. You watch him unleash fury that has been building for nearly a century, killing and punishing villains who deserve every ounce of wrath he brings down upon them. He ends Manchun's plan for conquering Cormer, slaying the vampire version of his ancient enemy in a confrontation that should have been final. But even in this moment of victory, Elminster knows the truth. He divines that more Manchun clones exist, sleeping in hidden places, waiting to awaken in the wake of this one's destruction. The dark power of Manchun seems unconquerable, a plague that can never be fully eradicated. The period from 1385 to 1479 Dale reckoning represents 94 years stolen from Elminster's life. Not stolen in the same way as his century of stasis before Myth Drannor fell, but stolen nonetheless through the reduction of his capabilities, the destruction of everything he dedicated his existence to protecting, and the transformation of his greatest love into a ghost who can whisper, but never again embrace him. These are the lost decades, years that passed in a blur of survival and desperate adaptation. Years when the legendary sage of Shadowdale became just another refugee in a world that no longer made sense. The toll on Elminster manifests in ways both obvious and subtle. His body, kept alive for more than a millennium through magic, shows signs of aging that were never present before. His mind, sharp as ever, carries memories of losses that compound across the centuries, each one adding to a burden that grows heavier with every passing year. His spirit, once sustained by connection to Mistra and purpose derived from serving her, now operates on momentum and stubborn refusal to surrender, even when surrender might offer merciful release. You see the weight of failure in his eyes when he thinks no one is watching. He failed to prevent the Spellplague. He failed to save Mistra from Cyric and Shar's conspiracy. He failed to protect the symbol from the madness that consumed her. He failed to maintain the world as it was, failed to preserve the order he spent centuries building, failed to prevent the catastrophe that reshaped Faerun into something alien and wrong. Logic offers its usual cold comfort. How could one person, even one as powerful as Elminster, prevent the murder of a goddess by two other gods working in conspiracy? How could anyone protect another from magical backlash that struck with the force of reality itself fracturing? How could any individual maintain world order when the fundamental structure of magic collapsed? But logic changes nothing about the core truth. He survived when millions died. He endured when others, perhaps more deserving, fell into dust and oblivion. He persists not because he has earned the right to continue, but because fate has not yet granted him permission to rest. The Spellplague teaches him a lesson even more brutal than what he learned during the time of troubles. Dependence creates vulnerability, yes, but existence itself guarantees loss. Live long enough, and you will watch everything you love transform or die. Accumulate enough power to matter, and you will inevitably face threats that exceed your ability to respond. Dedicate yourself to protecting something, and the universe will eventually find a way to destroy it, despite your best efforts. The years between the Spellplague and the restoration of the Weave become a blur in Elminster's memory, not because nothing happened, but because so much of what happened simply involved surviving from one day to the next. There were battles, certainly. There were moments of triumph, victories against smaller threats, problems solved through application of knowledge that predated the Spellplague. But the overwhelming sensation of those decades is helplessness. The knowledge that the world needs a champion with power to reshape reality. And all it has is an old man with fragments of forgotten magic, and more grief than any being should carry. This is the third lesson in Elminster's saga of failure. Survival is not victory. Endurance is not success. Living through catastrophe does not erase the catastrophe, does not restore what was lost, does not absolve you of the guilt that comes from continuing to exist when so many others did not. The Spellplague stole 94 years from Elminster's life, transformed his greatest love into a ghost, murdered his goddess for the second time, and reduced him to a shadow of his former might. He survived, but survival feels less like blessing and more like curse, less like triumph and more like punishment for the sin of being too stubborn to die, when perhaps death would have been mercy. The symbol exists now as a weave ghost, riding the fragments of restored magic, whispering warnings to her former apprentices who rule Aglarond in her absence, observing but unable to truly participate in the world she once shaped with her will. Elminster carries the knowledge that her sacrifice restored him, that she gave up existence as a physical being so that he could continue fighting battles that seem increasingly futile. The debt weighs on him, adds to the accumulation of obligations and losses that define his existence across more than 13 centuries. Section 4. Personal failures and broken relationships. Beyond the grand catastrophes that reshaped the world, beyond the falls of cities and the deaths of goddesses, Elminster carries wounds of a more intimate nature. These are the failures measured not in nations lost, but in relationships broken, not in magical catastrophes, but in trust betrayed, not in the collapse of civilizations, but in the quiet devastation of personal connections that fractured beyond repair. You turn your attention now to the human cost of immortality, to the price Elminster pays for living across centuries, while those around him age, change, betray, or simply fade into memory, leaving only scars behind. The relationship with his first Mistra, the goddess he initially knew as Miajala Darkies, shapes everything that follows in ways both beautiful and tragic. You watch a young Elminster, still raw from the murder of his family, still burning with rage at the magelords who destroyed his kingdom of Athalanter, meet a woman who offers to teach him magic. He does not know she is a goddess wearing mortal flesh. He knows only that she is powerful, knowledgeable, and willing to help him gain the power he needs for revenge. The relationship that develops between them transcends the simple bond of teacher and student, becoming something deeper, more complex, tinged with romance and genuine affection. But the foundation rests on deception, however well-intentioned. Miajala hides her true nature, allows Elminster to believe she is merely a talented mortal wizard, lets him develop feelings for someone who does not truly exist in the form he perceives. When she finally reveals herself as Mistra, goddess of magic. After seemingly dying in battle and reforming from ashes, the revelation shatters something in their dynamic that can never be fully repaired. She offers to make him one of her chosen, and he accepts because what else can he do when faced with divinity? But you hear the undercurrent of betrayal in his thoughts, the sense that the woman he cared for was always something other than what he believed, that every intimate moment carried the weight of divine manipulation, disguised as genuine connection. The complexity only deepens over the centuries that follow. Elminster serves Mistra faithfully, loves her in whatever way a mortal can love a goddess, dedicates his entire existence to protecting magic and advancing her will. But the power dynamic can never be equal. She is divine, eternal in ways that transcend even his extended lifespan, capable of seeing futures and possibilities he cannot comprehend. He is chosen, granted tremendous power and extended life, but ultimately still a tool in service to a greater purpose. Their relationship, whatever genuine affection it contains, remains fundamentally transactional. She grants power. He provides service. Love exists, but always filtered through the lens of goddess and worshipper, never quite achieving the equality that true partnership requires. This pattern repeats with the new Mistra, who emerges after the time of troubles. Midnight ascends to godhood, takes the name and portfolio of the slain goddess, and accepts Elminster as her chosen. But the romantic and sometimes sexual relationship that existed with the first Mistra does not continue with this new iteration. Midnight brings her own personality, her own perspective shaped by merely 3 decades of mortal life, rather than millennia of divine existence. She respects Elminster, values his service, relies on his experience and wisdom. But she is not the Mistra he loved, and he cannot pretend otherwise, no matter how seamlessly she assumes the role. The distance between them grows with each passing year, a reminder that what was lost during the time of troubles included not just power, but intimacy that can never be recovered. The symbol, Alasra Silverhand, enters Elminster's life as one of the 7 sisters, the adopted daughters of the first Mistra. Their relationship develops slowly over centuries, built on mutual respect between 2 of the most powerful chosen, on shared dedication to protecting magic and defending Faerun from threats both obvious and hidden. She becomes his lover, his partner in ways both romantic and tactical, someone who understands the weight of immortality and the burden of serving a goddess who demands everything. Their love is genuine, deep, transcending the casual affairs that Elminster has pursued across his long life. But the symbol carries her own demons. She suffers from berserker rages, fits of madness that emerge without warning, transforming her from brilliant mage and queen into something wild and dangerous. based on what we know of their relationship, Elminster's presence likely helps reduce the frequency of these episodes, his love providing an anchor that keeps her grounded, though the underlying instability never fully resolves. Her own people fear her despite her service to Aglarond, understanding that she is powerful but sometimes reckless, capable of protecting them, but also capable of destruction if her control slips. The relationship between Elminster and the symbol exists under constant shadow, love warring with the knowledge that her mental state remains fragile, that any day might bring the episode that finally shatters her completely. The Spellplague fulfills that terrible prophecy. You have already witnessed her descent into permanent madness, watched Elminster fail to save her despite his desperate efforts, seen him forced to release her because his presence only agitated her fractured mind. But the failure cuts even deeper when you understand the full context of their relationship. This was not just any lover lost to catastrophe. This was his partner across centuries, someone who understood him in ways no one else could, someone who shared his burdens and offered companionship through the endless years of service to an often demanding goddess. Losing the symbol means losing the one person who made immortality bearable, the one relationship that approached equality, despite the power imbalances that defined everything else in his life. The romantic relationships scatter across his long life like broken glass, each one reflecting a different facet of failure. He has loved many women across the centuries, left behind a trail of single mothers and abandoned children, fathered bastards he rarely acknowledges or supports. One of those daughters, Narnra Chalice, born of his union with the song dragon Merjanthra Chalice, eventually robs his home in Waterdeep. A child he abandoned seeking retribution, or perhaps simply taking what she feels he owes her. Elminster lures her into his web of schemes, using his own daughter as a pawn in fighting a conspiracy of wizards, demonstrating the casual cruelty that immortality breeds when you have seen too many generations come and go to value individual connections. The pattern reveals a fundamental dysfunction in how Elminster approaches intimate relationships. He lives too long to commit fully to mortals who will age and die within what feels like moments to him. He carries too much baggage, too many scars, too many memories of previous lovers lost to time or tragedy. He serves a goddess whose demands supersede personal connections, whose missions pull him away at critical moments, whose greater purpose always takes precedence over individual happiness. So he takes lovers casually, enjoys companionship when available, but never truly invests in relationships the way someone expecting to live a normal lifespan might. The cost accumulates over centuries, a collection of broken hearts and abandoned children and moments of intimacy that led nowhere except to more loneliness. Simgaril Marul, who called herself the Shadow Soul, represents perhaps the most direct betrayal among Elminster's students and associates. She sought him out, specifically requesting his tutelage, presenting herself as an ambitious young mage eager to learn from the legendary sage of Shadowdale. Elminster agreed to teach her, partly because Mystra herself encouraged the arrangement, seeing potential in Simgaril's ambition and believing that Elminster's guidance might temper her more selfish tendencies. The goddess wanted Simgaril to become an energetic creator of spells, to spread magic throughout the realms through her connections with various organizations, and hoped that Elminster could make her a better instrument for advancing magic's cause. But Mystra also recognized what Elminster apparently did not see clearly enough. Simgaril was fundamentally a user, someone who viewed relationships as transactions, who would likely betray any tutor or benefactor if doing so served her interests. She joined both the cult of the dragon and the Gentarim, playing the organizations against each other, accumulating power and magical knowledge without regard for the consequences. When the time came for her to choose between loyalty to Elminster and her own advancement, she chose herself without hesitation, turning against her teacher in ways that demonstrated how little his instruction had affected her core nature. The betrayal stings precisely because Elminster should have seen it coming. He has lived more than a millennium, has observed countless students and apprentices, has studied human nature with the thoroughness of someone who has watched empires rise and fall. Yet he allowed himself to trust Simgaril, allowed Mystra's encouragement to override his own instincts, allowed hope that he could shape this ambitious young mage into something better to blind him to the warning signs that were apparently obvious even to the goddess. The failure is not just of judgment, but of ego, of believing that his teaching could overcome fundamental character flaws, of assuming that wisdom accumulated over centuries somehow makes him immune to being manipulated by someone with a fraction of his experience. Simgaril eventually meets her end in a conflagration of her own making. Her meteor swarm turned back upon her by Elminster himself, destroying both her and the blue dragon Dracolic Aghastam she rode into battle. The irony does not escape you. The student who betrayed her master dies by her own spell, reflected by the one who taught her magic in the first place. But the victory feels hollow, another failure wearing the mask of triumph. Elminster does not prevent Simgaril's corruption. He merely destroys what she became after his teaching proved insufficient to reshape her nature. Another student lost, another relationship ending in betrayal and death, another reminder that power and wisdom cannot guarantee success in the most human of endeavors. Helping someone become better than they are. The conflicts with Manchun, the founder and leader of the Gentarim, span centuries and reveal a different kind of failure. Manshoon represents everything Elminster opposes. A brilliant wizard who uses magic for domination rather than enlightenment, who builds organizations based on fear and control rather than cooperation, who seeks power for its own sake rather than in service to any higher purpose. Their rivalry becomes legendary. Magical duels between two of Faerun's most powerful archmages, battles that reshape landscapes and enter into songs. But Elminster never fully defeats Manshoon, despite multiple confrontations across the centuries. The conflict escalates during the period following the Spellplague, when Elminster's power is drastically reduced. The only known Manshoon clone to have survived into the modern era is actually a vampire. He was bitten and turned by the Night King Orlak, who the vampire Manshoon promptly tracked down and killed, and came to secretly rule over the city of Westgate on the Dragon Coast. This Manshoon presses his advantage against a diminished opponent. Their confrontations during this period demonstrate how dangerous Elminster becomes when stripped of his usual overwhelming power advantage. He must rely on cunning, on manipulation, on desperate gambles, rather than simply overwhelming his opponent with superior magic. Manshoon even manages to temporarily destroy Elminster in one particularly vicious confrontation, a victory that sends shockwaves through those who believed the Sage of Shadowdale was truly immortal. Elminster survives only through intervention by the symbol and eventually Mystra herself, who retrieves him from the 9 hells where his essence was trapped. The rescue demonstrates both his importance to the goddess and his fundamental dependence on external intervention when facing the most dangerous threats. He cannot stand alone against enemies of Manshoon's caliber, cannot guarantee victory through his own power, cannot escape the simple fact that even legends can be defeated if circumstances align against them. The humiliation deepens when considering a specific incident where Elminster was killed by a meteor swarm and a collapsing building in the novel Death Masks, slain by a much less experienced wizard who simply caught him by surprise. The element of surprise proves everything in that moment, revealing that despite more than a millennium of experience, despite accumulated wisdom that fills libraries, despite power that once rivaled gods, Elminster remains vulnerable to the same basic tactics that might fell any mage who fails to maintain constant vigilance. The death is temporary, reversed through divine intervention, but the lesson remains. Reputation and past victories provide no actual protection. One moment of inattention, one unexpected attack, one underestimated opponent, and even Elminster armor can fall. According to those who have studied Elminster's capabilities, he ranks below several other ancient spellcasters in raw power. Larlock Halaster Blackcloak and some of the Seven Sisters all exceed him in certain aspects of magical might. Elminster wins confrontations primarily through cleverness, through practical experience accumulated over centuries, through maintaining more of his sanity than other ancient wizards who have descended into madness or obsession. This represents both strength and limitation. He succeeds not through overwhelming superiority, but through careful application of advantages that can be negated if opponents prepare properly or catch him at a disadvantage. The cumulative effect transforms Elminster from the idealistic young prince who sought to avenge his family and restore justice into something harder, more cynical, more isolated. He maintains his commitment to protecting magic and serving Mistra, but the joy has long since drained from that service. He continues fighting threats to Faerun, but with the grim determination of someone who knows that victory is always temporary and failure inevitable given enough time. He takes lovers, but keeps them at emotional distance, protecting himself from the pain of loss by never fully investing in connections that mortality or catastrophe will inevitably sever. He teaches students, but expects betrayal, maintaining vigilance against those who would use him, and then discard him once they have gained what they sought. The loneliness that results from this defensive posture becomes its own form of failure. Elminster has allies, has companions, has people who respect and occasionally love him. But true intimacy, the kind that requires vulnerability and trust and willingness to risk being hurt, increasingly eludes him as the centuries pile upon one another. He becomes what many ancient and powerful beings eventually become: more force of nature than person, more legend than individual, more symbol than flesh and blood. People see Elminster the Archmage, Elminster the Chosen, Elminster the Sage of Shadowdale. Fewer and fewer see just Elminster, the man beneath the titles, the being who still hurts and doubts and grieves despite power that could level cities. This is the fourth lesson in Elminster's saga of failure. Power and wisdom cannot protect you from the fundamental vulnerabilities of conscious existence itself. You can live for millennia and still make terrible choices in relationships. You can accumulate knowledge that fills libraries and still misjudge human nature catastrophically. You can wield magic that reshapes reality and still be killed by a surprise attack from a less experienced opponent. You can serve faithfully for centuries and still watch those you love descend into madness, or betray you, or simply drift away, because immortality means eventually losing everyone who matters. The personal failures hurt worse than the cosmic ones precisely because they reveal that despite everything, despite all the power and all the wisdom and all the experience, you remain fundamentally alone, fundamentally limited, fundamentally unable to escape the basic tragedies that define conscious existence across all scales of time and power. Section 5. Modern Limitations and the Weight of Mortality. The second sundering arrives in 1487 Dale Reckoning, bringing with it the promise of restoration and the reality of irrevocable change. You watch as Mistra returns fully to her divine throne, as the weave stabilizes under her renewed governance, as the wounds inflicted by the Spellplague finally begin to heal after more than a century of devastation. The geography of Faerun reshapes itself once more. Lands that were swapped to the mirror world of a bear returning to their proper place. The worlds finally separating as they were always meant to be. It should feel like victory, like the ending of a terrible nightmare that lasted far too long. But for Elminster, standing in the ruins of Myth Drannor after crashing the Netherese enclave of Thultanthar into the already devastated city, victory tastes like ash and regret. The conflict leading to this moment reveals how desperate Elminster has become, how willing to make terrible choices in service to preventing even worse catastrophes. The Shadowvar Prince Telemont Tanthal, now serving as Shar's chosen, schemes to transform the weave into a new shadow weave, intending to move the Shade Enclave to Cormenther and complete a ritual that would hand control of all magic to the goddess of darkness. Meanwhile, Elminster searches for Kelvin Aronson's writings on the weave at Candlekeep, working alongside Laeral and Illustrial Silverhand, who prepare their own destruction to prevent anyone from using their power to control the weave. Elminster manages to trick the Netherese by masquerading as High Prince Tanthal. But he and the Silverhand sisters are in turn tricked by Larlock, the ancient Lick who pretends to wish to use magical energies to strengthen the weave. Instead, Larlock absorbs the energies of destroyed wards for himself and heads to Myth Drannor, forcing Elminster and the Chosen to follow. This betrayal demonstrates yet again that even after more than a millennium of experience, Elminster remains vulnerable to deception from beings whose amorality and patience match or exceed his own. The resolution of the Spellplague comes through multiple coordinated actions. Adventurers following the Order of Blue Fire eventually reach the Supreme Throne, where they release the mad god Cyric from his imprisonment. With help from a weakened Mistra, they destroy the Order of Blue Fire and the power source of the Spellplague itself, restoring the weave and the plane of Tuiomerheart in the process. Elminster defeats Prince Tanthal in a mage duel, a victory that demonstrates he retains formidable power despite his diminishment during the Spellplague years. But victory demands a terrible price. The Netherese enclave of Thultanthar, the flying city of Shade, crashes atop Myth Drannor. The decision to use Thultanthar as a weapon against the very city whose fall haunts Elminster more than any other failure, represents the culmination of impossible choices compounding across centuries. Myth Drannor, which fell in 714 Dale Reckoning, while he was trapped in stasis, which stood for more than a millennium as a monument to his absence, now suffers further devastation through his direct action. The survivors, including Coronel Ilsevel Miritor and her consort Flar Starbrow Melruth, are rescued by the ancient Srinchi, who transports them to Semberholm before disappearing. But the ruins themselves, the physical remnants of the greatest elven city ever built, are crushed beneath the weight of a falling Netherese enclave. Elminster himself is saved by Mistra, who gains full control over the weave once more, stopping Shar from turning it into a new shadow weave. The goddess's intervention prevents immediate death, pulls him back from the brink as she has done before, demonstrates that he retains enough value to warrant divine rescue. But the rescue cannot erase what was done, cannot restore Myth Drannor to even the partial glory it maintained as ruins, cannot undo the choice to destroy one corrupted city by dropping it onto the remains of another. As 1487 Dale Reckoning came to a close, the second sundering ended with the full return of Mistra and the weave, the separation of the worlds Aber and Toril, and the final dissolution of the Spellplague. Magic stabilizes, returning to reliable function for the first time in more than a century. The weave, that fundamental structure that allows magic to exist in controlled and predictable ways, is restored by Mistra's governance. The crisis that began with Cyric and Shar's murder of the goddess in 1385 Dale Reckoning finally resolves. 102 years of chaos and devastation, ending with the world fundamentally transformed, but at least no longer actively tearing itself apart. But restoration is not resurrection. What returns is not what was lost. The Elminster who emerges from the second sundering carries scars that will never heal, has been fundamentally changed by a century of powerlessness and grief, can never again believe in his own invincibility the way he once did. The Mistra who returns, while bearing the same name and portfolio, represents yet another iteration of the goddess, raising questions about continuity and identity that Elminster no longer has energy to fully explore. She is back, magic is stable, the weave functions. That is enough. That must be enough. The year 1489 Dale Reckoning brings another transformation, this one quieter, but perhaps more final. In 1488 Dale Reckoning, prayers to deities went unanswered, though their chosen were still present. But in 1489 Dale Reckoning, prayers to the gods began to be answered again. Yet the various deities withdrew their power and divine gifts from most of their chosen, purpose fulfilled. The decision is pragmatic from a divine perspective. The crisis has passed. The chosen fulfilled their purpose. Why maintain such powerful mortal agents when the world no longer requires their intervention at that scale? But for beings like Elminster, who have spent centuries or millennia defined by their status as chosen, the withdrawal feels like abandonment, like being told that your service is no longer needed, that you have become obsolete, that the role which gave your endless life meaning has been revoked. He retains some connection to Mystra, remains more capable than ordinary mages, still carries knowledge and experience accumulated over more than 1,200 years. But he is no longer truly chosen in the way he once was, no longer channels divine power that places him among the most formidable beings in Faerun, no longer stands as the sage of Shadowdale in anything except name and reputation. His magic functions reliably now that the weave has stabilized, no longer driving him toward madness with each spell as it did during the dark years following the Spellplague. Yet the power he commands represents a pale shadow of what he once wielded, abilities that would impress most mages, but fall far short of the legendary Archmage, who once reshaped reality with gestures and words. The physical reality of his diminished state manifests in ways both subtle and profound. He ages slowly rather than not at all. The divine magic that once kept him frozen at optimal appearance, gradually fading. The silver fire that burned in his eyes for more than a millennium dims to barely visible embers. A faint reminder of power that no longer flows through him with the same intensity. His hands shake slightly when attempting complex spellwork, not from age in the traditional sense, but from the accumulated trauma of having magic stripped away, restored partially, stripped again, restored differently. He can still cast impressive spells, can still call upon decades of research and experimentation, can still demonstrate why his name carries weight across the realm. But he cannot do what he once did, cannot match the feats that made him legendary, cannot stand as equals with the truly ancient powers. Those who study such things debate his current capabilities endlessly. This suggests he has fallen far from the heights where he once stood unchallenged. The transformation forces him to adapt in ways that would have been unthinkable during his prime. He can no longer solve problems through overwhelming magical superiority, can no longer teleport across Faerun at will without risk, can no longer assume that his power will carry the day against any opponent foolish enough to challenge him. Instead, he must rely on cunning, on manipulation, on working through younger and more vigorous heroes, rather than acting directly. He becomes more of a quest giver than a quest completer, more advisor than warrior, more sage than archmage. The role is not without value. Wisdom accumulated over 12 centuries matters, Connections built across that vast span of time provide leverage that raw power cannot match. Knowledge of history and precedent offers advantages that younger mages lack. But it is not the same. It can never be the same. According to those who have studied Elminster's capabilities, he ranks below several other ancient spellcasters in raw power. Larlock Halaster Blackcloak and some of the Seven Sisters all exceed him in certain aspects of magical might. Elminster wins confrontations primarily through cleverness, through practical experience accumulated over centuries, through maintaining more of his sanity than other ancient wizards who have descended into madness or obsession. This represents both strength and limitation. He succeeds not through overwhelming superiority, but through careful application of advantages that can be negated if opponents prepare properly or catch him at a disadvantage. The weight of mortality becomes increasingly real. He can be killed. He has been killed multiple times across his long existence, always pulled back through divine intervention or stored contingencies or sheer fortunate coincidence. But now when he dies, he might actually stay dead. The safety net has been removed, or at least made far less reliable. Mystra may or may not choose to intervene the next time someone gets lucky with a meteor swarm, or catches him by surprise with an assassin's blade. The silver fire that once resurrected him automatically may no longer carry enough power to restore him after catastrophic damage. Every battle carries real risk now. Every confrontation with powerful enemies represents genuine danger rather than mere inconvenience. The symbol remains lost to him, wandering somewhere in her madness, beyond his ability to fully restore, even with the return of the weave and Mistra's renewed power. He spent years during the Dark Period, following the Spellplague, stealing magic items to feed to her, trying to stabilize her shattered mind through raw magical energy, achieving only temporary lucidity before she slipped back into confusion and rage. She sacrificed herself to restore him in 1479 Dale Reckoning, transforming into a weave ghost, a sentience that rides the fragments of magic, but no longer possesses physical form. This ongoing failure compounds all the others, serves as daily reminder that despite everything, despite his legendary status and accumulated wisdom and centuries of experience, he could not save the one person who matters most to him. The relationship that once gave meaning to immortality, that made the endless centuries bearable, has been reduced to this. Knowing she exists as a ghost in the weave, able to perceive magic and whisper warnings, but never again able to embrace him, never again able to share the intimacy they once knew. The hope of true restoration fades as time demonstrates that even Mistra's full return cannot instantly heal wounds this deep. The broader question haunts him in the quiet hours before dawn. What has it all been for? He has lived for more than 1,200 years, has served Mystra faithfully through multiple incarnations, has saved the world countless times, has prevented catastrophes that would have unmade reality itself. And what does he have to show for it? His first great love was a goddess who deceived him about her nature. His second died during the time of troubles, replaced by a stranger wearing her name. His third descended into madness and then sacrificed herself to restore him, transforming into a ghost. His children are scattered and mostly unknown to him. Bastards abandoned because immortality and fatherhood cannot easily coexist. His students either died, betrayed him, or drifted away to pursue their own paths. The cities he tried to protect fell despite his efforts. The magic he dedicated his life to defending has been broken and restored and broken again, reshaped so many times that the version currently maintained by Mistra bears only passing resemblance to what existed when he first became chosen. The accumulation of failures across centuries creates a weight that even immortality cannot fully bear. Every scar adds to the total. Every loss compounds the grief. Every mistake echoes through the decades that follow. Myth Drannor fell and then was destroyed again, twice marked by his absence and his presence. Mistra died repeatedly, each time taking part of him with her. The symbol went mad. The woman he loved lost to confusion and rage, then sacrificed to weave ghost existence. The Spellplague stripped him of power and purpose, left him wandering for nearly a century as a shadow of himself. The second sundering restored some of what was lost, but took away his status as chosen, reduced him from legend to merely powerful mortal. And through it all he endures, because endurance is what the chosen do. Because Mistra's purpose for him apparently is not yet complete. Because some fundamental stubbornness prevents him from simply walking away and letting younger heroes carry burdens he has borne too long. The recognition that he is no longer essential, that the world continues to turn without requiring his constant intervention, should feel liberating. For more than a millennium, he carried the weight of believing that his actions mattered at a cosmic scale, that without him, catastrophe would unfold unchecked, that he must be everywhere and solve everything, because no one else possessed sufficient power and wisdom. The gods' withdrawal of divine gifts from their chosen effectively says, "Your service was valuable, but it is no longer required at that intensity. The crisis has passed. You can rest now." But rest feels like obsolescence when you have defined yourself entirely through service, when your identity has been shaped by being Mistra's chosen for longer than most civilizations exist, when you have no idea who you are if you are not the sage of Shadowdale standing against darkness. You follow him through the years immediately following the second sundering, watching him adjust to his new limitations, his reduced role, his transformation from legend to footnote. He makes Shadowdale and sometimes Suzil his bases of operations, maintaining connections to Cormor's royal family, continuing his long tradition of behind-the-scenes involvement in the kingdom's politics. He aids the monks of Candlekeep when various groups attack the great library seeking knowledge, defending the repository with whatever power he can still muster. He works with the Harpers, that organization he helped refound more than 700 years ago, coordinating responses to threats that require subtlety rather than direct magical assault. He lives, continues, endures as he has always done. But the fire that once drove him has dimmed to coals. The passion that sustained him through centuries of service, reduced to stubborn refusal to quit before his task is completely finished. The mortality that he always intellectually understood, but never truly felt, becomes increasingly real. The adjustment burns. After more than 1,000 years of standing at the forefront, of being the one who faces threats directly, of never backing down from any challenge, becoming the support character rather than the protagonist feels like another form of failure. The loneliness compounds everything else. Elminster has allies, has companions, has people who respect and occasionally love him. But true intimacy, the kind that requires vulnerability and trust and willingness to risk being hurt, increasingly eludes him as the centuries pile upon one another. He becomes what many ancient and powerful beings eventually become: more force of nature than person, more legend than individual, more symbol than flesh and blood. People see Elminster the Archmage, Elminster the former chosen, Elminster the sage of Shadowdale. Fewer and fewer see just Elminster, the man beneath the titles, the being who still hurts and doubts and grieves despite power that could once level cities. Elminster stands in the ruins of Myth Drannor once more, as he has stood so many times before, surrounded by the physical manifestation of his greatest failures. The city fell while he was trapped. The city was destroyed again through his direct action. The golden towers that once reached toward the sky lie in rubble, crushed first by demons, and then by a flying city used as a weapon. The libraries that once contained the greatest knowledge in the world are ash. The people who once walked these streets in peace and wonder are scattered or dead. And he endures, carrying the memory of what was lost, bearing witness to the cost of power and the price of failure. The final lesson in Elminster's saga of failure is perhaps the cruelest. Even if you survive everything, even if you endure across centuries when everyone else dies or gives up or goes mad, even if you serve faithfully through catastrophe after catastrophe, you will still diminish. Power fades, relevance erodes, the world moves on, requiring new heroes for new ages, making legends into history and history into forgotten footnotes. You become the old man telling stories about greater days, the relic from a previous era, the name that younger people recognize but do not truly understand. And you continue because continuing is all you know how to do. Because the alternative is admitting that everything you sacrificed, everyone you lost, every failure you accumulated was ultimately for nothing. This is not heroism. This is simply what remains when all other options have been exhausted. One man, diminished and scarred, carrying burdens no one should have to bear, persisting because persistence is all he has left. The sage of Shadowdale has failed more than he has succeeded, has lost more than he has saved, has watched the world burn despite his best efforts to prevent catastrophe. But he stands, he endures, he continues, not because he believes he can win, but because giving up has never been in his nature, because some fundamental stubbornness survives even after everything else has been stripped away. You leave him there in the ruins, standing among the ghosts of choices he cannot unmake, contemplating mortality that grows more real with each passing year. He retains some magic, still commands respect from those who know the stories, still possesses wisdom accumulated over more than 12 centuries. But the legend has become human again, stripped of divine favor, reduced to what he was always meant to be. A mortal wizard who lived far too long and saw far too much, who accumulated more failures than any one being should carry, who persists despite everything because he does not know how to do anything else. If you enjoyed this deep exploration into the failures and struggles of one of the Forgotten Realms' most legendary figures, please like and subscribe to support more lore dives into the hidden truths behind the heroes and villains of D&D. Your support helps me continue bringing you these comprehensive ASMR-style journeys through the darker corners of the realms, revealing the humanity beneath the legends, the scars beneath the glory, the failures that shape even the mightiest among us. Thank you for walking this path with me through Elminster's long centuries of service and sacrifice.